First and foremost, what we're not going to do is we're not going to prove what the right calendar is. I am not here to say, ta-da, I have solved all the mysteries of the universe and I know exactly the right calendar. I am, however, going to explain to you why the choice that I have made, I believe, is the right choice for this time where we live, and when we live, etc. So making a right decision is what I want to talk about as opposed to proving the correct and perfect calendar. Some things, it seems like he's allowed, and this is my language, I'll use my own language, I call these things gray. Now, by the way, the people that are doing their own research and coming up with their own calendars, they think there's no such thing as gray, it's black and white. The reason I call it gray is that when I've got a huge number of people saying A, another group saying B, and another group saying C, and we could even go to D, E, and F, and G, as far as what this thing should look like, and each one is researched and studied and adamant about their position, that to me is gray. But I want you to understand that the calendar issue, as well as these other ones that we may go into at some point that also divide us, the ones that we are split on but we can't seem to win the argument, arguing about it ends up being the same thing as trying to convince someone in mainstream Christianity to keep the commandments. They can't see what you see. So the people that are in calendar A cannot see what calendar B says. And calendar B can't see what calendar A or C says. They just can't see it. So you can't change their mind. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've never seen anybody convince anybody to change their position on the calendar. I have not seen it. It should be very clear, and I think this is, again, the driving force behind the calendar problem, is that we see that Yahweh's very serious about his days. And he wants us to take them seriously, and he wants us to observe them. Can we all agree? So with that being said, we understand what's driving each person who's figuring out their calendar issues for themselves is that they're wanting to do what's right in his eyes because they realize how serious he takes it. There are those that will look at it and say, we declare by the sighted moon, which would be a crescent. There are others that would say we would do it by the calculation of the conjunction. Now, one of the weak arguments is that, well, they couldn't have done the conjunction calculation back in the days when this was happening. Yes, they could. Would you go up to the person who is native born to a language and tell them they don't understand their language and what the words mean? Would you go ahead and would you correct them on the definition of the words that they use? Would any of you? See, but this is what we do in our arrogance. Most of you, when I say most, I mean like most, were not raised with Hebrew. You just weren't. It's not your native tongue. You weren't raised speaking it and understanding it. Yet we're going to tell the Jewish community that Aviv doesn't mean spring. I did have an opinion on the calendar. I did teach a very specific calendar. I did do all the research because everybody says, oh, well, Rabbi, if you would just do that. I did all the research, trust me. Whatever you did, I put in those thousands of hours too. But there was a factor that everybody seemed to be ignoring or have missed that I'm going to share with you that I think is important. So here's the last piece of the puzzle I want to stick in there. Hillel II, who was a 4th century Nasi of the Sanhedrin. Nasi means president or the presiding head of the Sanhedrin. In around 350 something, in the 4th century. Hillel, the Nasi of the Sanhedrin, put a calendar together, at least it's accorded to him that it was his calendar, but he's the one that made the decision anyway, to put a calendar in place to be used by those in the diaspora, to be used by those not in the land. You also live in a world, and I'm not saying we should do this for convenience, but Abba also knew you'd be living in a world where we'd have jobs and other things that we'd have to deal with, which is also interacting with secular people that are going to be running those businesses and jobs. And so it's going to be a real tough call to go to your boss and say, I'm going to need some time off in April, but I got to wait till they sight the new moon. Or I'm going to need time off for trumpets, but I got to wait till they sight the new moon. So I'm not going to know if it's going to be Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. It's going to depend. It's going to be a little tough to plan out your life and your days off. So I'm not saying that the convenience is a main factor, but it's certainly a factor saying that, hey, this is a part of this. So this begs the question, has the Ruach been saying anything at this time that we have interpreted correctly? Or is the Ruach trying to get our attention to say, I've allowed this to be a mess so we can see what you do with the mess? How do you handle something that's basically entrenched and people that are in intractable positions? They will not budge. So what do you do? Because most of the people who argue will say, oh, I can't compromise. I'll lose my integrity. I'm not asking you to lose your integrity. If you really believe with full integrity your calendar position, keep your calendar, come with the rest of the body on Hillel II anyway, for unity. If your day's a day earlier or a day later than what everybody else is doing, do both. That's your integrity. But where's the unity going to be without that? See, unity is going to come from two places. It's going to come from eliminating most of, if not all of, the causes of division, but it's also something we need to pursue. To pursue it. He says in verse 19, so then let us pursue peace and the building up of one another.